set to work with international students to help them with questions about immigration regulations, benefits that come with their immigration status, and also getting used to the culture and academic setting in the United States. I've been at Iowa State for just a little bit over a year, but prior to that I was working at a university in the same field in Arlington, Virginia. I'll just go back to my first slide. But today I'm going to be talking about different types of work authorizations for international students. Right now it's a lot of abbreviations, CPT, OPT, and STEM OPT, but as we go through I will explain what each of them mean. So today, kind of going over two things. One is why to hire international students, and two is what are the different types of employment authorizations, and kind of what role does it play on the part of the employer when hiring these students. So the first section here is why hire an international student. I mean, and there are lots of different reasons why to hire an international student. One is the international students that have come to the US, they've already proven that they can be extremely successful by completing their degree in a language that is not native to them and a culture that's not native to them. So they're able to adapt to changes and still be successful. Also, international students are a great way to branch out. Potentially, if you are looking to get into a new market, they may have contacts in a country that you're looking to get into, as well as can help you understand the culture of that country if you don't have somebody in your office or a relationship already to be able to help go into that new market. The next option is that students are already fluent in English and most of the time one other language. So again, they help with if you are planning on traveling to any of the countries to do site visits or work there, they already are prepared to be able to help you be successful in that country. And lastly, students are coming from a different culture, so within your organization they are going to provide a different perspective than what you probably already have within your organization. So that's going to allow your organization to help grow and look at the roles in your office in a new perspective. The other reason to hire an international student that might not already be up here is that these students are highly motivated. I know a lot of times when companies are talking about international students, it comes up to, oh, one day they may want to have me sponsor them. And while that may not be something that all offices do, international students are coming into work wanting to show that they can be successful. They're highly motivated so that potentially they could change your mind to sponsor them, or they want to get as much work experience as they can in the US so that they can take it back to their home country to show, here's what I've learned in the United States. I'm now a top talent returning to the country and looking for the best jobs that they can when they go back. By the numbers, at Iowa State, international students are roughly 10 to 11% of the students that are enrolled every semester. So that for companies that are not interested in hiring international students, they are losing out on 1/10 of the talent pool when they are recruiting and looking for new employment. And you can see that of college students overall, I want to say this number is from 2016, is that they made up roughly 5% of the entire collegiate student body. So it's a large chunk of the population that is graduating from college. So you're losing out on some of the talent that is there if companies choose not to hire international students. All right. So now I'm going to go more into the different types of work authorizations. There may be a couple of resources going around. One is this kind of third of a sheet piece of paper, and these are kind of the general quick review notes of the different types of work authorizations for F1 students. And then there is also a larger sheet that's about 7 pages that's going around. And this is a hiring guide that we have for international, for employers that are wanting to hire international students. And this goes a little bit more further into depth. I've also included links to these resources on the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint is going to be made available after this session so that if you want to go back and have access to them, you'll be able to do that as well. But so for F1 students, there are three main types of work authorization that they can have. One is called curricular practical training. The abbreviation is CPT for short. The second one is optional practical training, OPT for short. And then the third one is STEM optional practical training. So STEM signifying science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then the last piece that I'm not really going to touch on today, because I believe somebody from Davis Brown is going to come and talk to the committee later on about H-1B visas and sponsorship. So the first one that we'll touch on is curricular practical training, CPT for short. So the overview of CPT is that for CPT, this type of authorization has to happen prior to a student is going to complete their degree. So for an undergraduate student, this is going to happen normally between their sophomore and senior years. A graduate student, it's going to happen during their second year, potentially third or fourth year if they're a doctoral student. And this is for normally an internship or a co-op that is going to be off campus. And it needs to be part of an integral part of the established curriculum of the university. So CPT is normally authorized on a semester by semester basis, and students need to be enrolled in a corresponding course at the university when they use CPT, and they get approval that the activity that they're planning on doing on CPT is connected to their degree through their academic department. So just kind of the eligibility, so you know the background of what makes a student eligible for CPT. So like I said, we're talking about students in F1 status. So at this point, they need to be in their F1 status for at least one academic year and have a valid status. The reason for one academic year is the U.S. government has set a regulation that says that they need to be here for one academic year. It's so the student can come in, get more experience as a student first, and not be coming here directly to work, as their primary objective is to be a student and complete their degree. Like I said, the work opportunity that they have needs to be connected to the major that they are pursuing. And a lot of questions that come up when talking about international student employment is what is the role of the employer in hiring an international student? And for the majority of the work authorizations that we're going to be talking about today, the role for an employer is very minimal for these types of work authorizations. And in this case, an employer would only need to issue an offer letter to the student saying that they have been given this opportunity to have an internship. On that offer letter, there are a couple of specific pieces of information that need to be included. One is that it should be on the employer's letterhead, so we know the company's name and address where the employment is going to be taking place. Since it's for an internship or co-op, there needs to be the specific start date when the employment is going to begin and the specific end date for when the employment will end, the title of their position and a brief description, and finally the number of hours per week that the student is going to be working, because there are two different types of CPT that can be issued. One is for part-time CPT, and with part-time CPT, there's a limit that a student cannot work more than 20 hours per week during that authorization. And the other type is full-time CPT. So that means that they can work anything above 20 hours per week. And with students being on CPT, there is a regulation for how much full-time CPT they can do. So for students, they are limited to no more than 364 days of full-time CPT because if they were to do more, they would lose their eligibility to apply for work authorization after they graduate. And this kind of goes through the application process. For CPT, the ability to be able to work off campus is approved by the International Student Office at a university. So this authorization, we request that students apply for it at least 2 weeks before their position is supposed to begin. And you can kind of see what the process is at Iowa State is that the student would go out, interview, receive their job offer letter and acceptance to the position. Then they would come back to us, and we have a mandatory online workshop for all students looking for work authorization so that they're able to go through, get a better understanding of what the work authorization means to them and what their requirements are for reporting and the timelines for doing it. So that they're well aware of what they can and can't do while during their work authorization. Next is they would request the work authorization from our office, and during that process it gets approval from their academic department, and then it comes back to us, and we will create a new I-20. The I-20 is the immigration document that every F1 student has that shows what university they're studying at in the U.S., their major, and is the prime document that's connected to their immigration in the U.S. And on it, once CPT is approved, on the second page, there's going to be a notation that says this student is eligible to work for this company starting on this specific date based off of the offer letter until this specific end date based off of the offer letter again. And then at that point, the student would just need to come into the employer's office and complete an I-9 to show that they're eligible to work within CPT for that time period. So the next work authorization is called Optional Practical Training, or OPT for short. When you're first learning about it, it's sometimes difficult to, since there's CPT and OPT, to remember which one is which. Kind of a good way to do it is C comes first in the alphabet, so usually students will do CPT first while they're a student, and then O comes later as it's something that they will do after they've completed their degree. So again, we have the OPT eligibility. Students need to be, again, in valid F1 status. Students need to have been in their academic program for at least 1 academic year, again, and that's considered a fall and a spring semester. And for OPT, students can get a new 12 months of OPT per degree level. So for instance, if a student gets a bachelor's degree, they're eligible for 12 months of OPT. Then if they want to go back to school, get a master's degree, they can get 12 more months. And if they go back for a PhD, they can then get an additional 12 months based on each degree completion and that they're going up. A student couldn't do a master's, work on OPT, and then go to the undergraduate level for OPT. That wouldn't be allowed because the US government wants to see that students continue to make upward progress in their educational program. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more kind of about the timing. So for OPT, it's something that is normally done after a student has completed their degree. And for this one, students have to apply to the US government to be able to get approval for OPT. And so I'm going to use this current semester as an example of kind of what the timeline looks for students. So at Iowa State, this semester's end date is May 4th. And so the US government opens up the application period for OPT starting 90 days before the program end date of a student. So that means that starting on roughly February 3rd this year, students were eligible to start applying for OPT and submit their applications to USCIS, which is the organization that handles all of the OPT applications. With that, students will submit their information, and they will put what date that they would like their work authorization to begin working to start. And that work authorization can be anywhere from the day after the end of the semester, which would be May 5th, up until 60 days after that, which is July 3rd. So they pick any day within that 60-day that period. And then they will apply and wait for what's called an employment authorization document to come. Kind of looks like a little driver's license and shows the specific start and end dates of their work authorization. And it takes roughly 90 days for the application to be processed by USCIS. All right, so for the employment requirements, again, during OPT, all of the employment that the student is going to be doing needs to be directly related to their major. And there are different types of employment that a student could do on it. It could be paid or unpaid, contractual work. Student could work with multiple employees. They can also start their own business if they want to, just as long as they are working at least 20 hours per week to maintain their employment level. Because during OPT, students are only given a maximum of 90 days total during their 12-month period where they cannot have a job. And so if a student goes over the 90 days, they are expected to complete their time in the US and exit the US or transfer their degree to a new program if they are thinking about continuing their academic studies. And so as long as the student is working 20 hours per week, it would stop the counter of their unemployment days. So just kind of the application process, I went over a little bit of it before. But for this, again, we have another workshop specifically designed for OPT, so students are aware of kind of the reporting requirements that they have on it. They have to report anytime their address changes, anytime that they have employment changes to our office, as we need to enter it into the US government database that manages all of the F1 students that are working or that are studying in the US. And then we will make an updated document recommending them for OPT. At that point, they will come in, bring in a collection of their documents that they need to use, that they need to show when they apply. And I've got that on the next screen of what it looks like for their application. It gets mailed to the US government, takes roughly 90 days for the US government to review it, hopefully approve it, send the actual document that shows they're eligible to work back to the student. And then at that point, once the start date has been reached on the EAD card, the student is eligible to go and start working with the company. With this, once a student has the EAD card, it's open work authorization within their field of study, so they can work any place that they want to in the US as long as it's related to their major. And when a student goes in to complete the I-9, this is the first time that a company needs to do anything related with their work authorization, as it is on the student to apply for it, get the work authorization. And so for OPT, the only requirement for an employer is the same with any domestic employee of filling out an I-9 to confirm their work authorization. And then this is what it looks like for an application for a student when they do want to apply for OPT. There is a fee of $410 that all students must pay to be able to apply. Then they need to get a couple of passport photos within the past 30 days because they're going to receive a card that has their photo on it. There are two governmental forms. One is called the I-765, and this is the actual application piece for applying for OPT. The second one, the G1145, is a document that provides students with electronic updates about their application. And then they will get a copy of the I-20 that we submitted that recommends them for OPT, history of if they've used any CPT, because they have to be able to prove that they didn't use more than 12 months of full-time CPT when they apply, and then copies of their immigration documents to show that they are in the country currently in F1 status, such as their electronic entry record called the I-94, their I-20, their passport, and their visa. And then the final main type of work authorization that is available to F1 students is called STEM OPT. And so this is majors that are in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And for this is an extension of up to 24 months of the first 12 months of OPT for a student. And so it allows them to continue to engage in employment after they have completed the first 12 months of their OPT. And the US government just recently changed it. So now a student can potentially use two 24-month STEM extensions in their lifetime. The regulation used to state that students were only eligible to use one during their lifetime. And so when students are applying for this extension, they must be in a valid period of their 12-month OPT when they submit their application. So here is kind of going through the eligibility. And so students must apply during the valid period of OPT. And then they're able to get the STEM extension based on two features. One is called, sorry about that, everybody. One is based off of their SIP code. So each major in the US, the Department of Education has set a 6-digit code that states what this major is considered. And then each university looks at their majors and assigns the appropriate SIP code that corresponds to the Department of Education SIP codes. And through this, the Department of Homeland Security maintains a list of all of the SIP codes that would be eligible for the STEM extension. So at Iowa State, some of the main ones, you get all of the engineering, you get management information systems, there's a Master of Finance degree, chemistry, mathematics, biology, physics, computer science. And it all depends on university by university for if the university uses the SIP code based on the requirements of the degree program that match what the Department of Homeland Security uses. So it's possible that one university could have a non-STEM eligible SIP code assigned to their major, where another university does have it. So it depends major to major and student by student based on what university they went to. So that's number one of the two requirements. The second one is that each company needs to be registered with E-Verify, which the US government uses to confirm that the documents that are provided to complete the I-9 are valid. So as long as a student's working for a company that those two criteria are met, they are eligible to apply for the 24-month STEM extension. And then this is where we get into the employer does have a role in the application process for a student to get this extra 24-month STEM extension. There is now what's called an I-983 training plan. This came into effect recently when the STEM extension became 24 months. And so it is a 6-page document that the employer will work with the student to complete. Essentially, it's providing details about the employer, about the employment and the position that the student has. It covers information about the goals and objectives of the student's position, how the student is being supervised and evaluated, kind of what type of mentorship and supervision the students are getting to show that it's still an educational piece to their employment. And then with it, there's also a couple of evaluations that students and their supervisors will do to submit. And this is the one piece that we get into. Employers need to help students complete in order to apply for the STEM extension. But at this point, there is still no financial cost to the employer when students are applying for the 24-month STEM extension. Okay. And then with all of that, I talked primarily about work authorizations for F1 students. In addition, if you all have these employer's guide for hiring international students, you'll see on pages 3 and 6, there's also information about hiring students that are in J1 status. And for hiring students in J1 status, they have a work authorization type called academic training, which allows them to potentially work up to 18 months within their field of study. And it can be while they're a student and post-graduation. And then for doctoral students, they're potentially eligible to work for up to 36 months once they've received their degree. But there's just some information in there for you to look at. But most commonly, if you're looking at hiring international students, they're going to fall into the F1 category. So I'll touch just a little bit on the H-1B visa. And this is something that, as an international student advisor, we wouldn't advise on. As an employer, you would want to work with an immigration attorney, either within your company or to go out to an immigration attorney to get more information about sponsoring a student to have them continue to work with you, potentially after the student's 12 months of OPT or the student's 24-month STEM extension. And so it's essentially, at this point is where a cost does come into the employer, because you as the employer would be sponsoring the student. The student would need to have a degree that's a bachelor's, master's, or PhD degree. And the H-1B period, the first period is for 3 years, and then it's potentially, you can extend it for an additional 3 years. Through a lot of them there. And there are 2 types of H-1Bs depending on if you are a private institution or a public institution of higher education. And the one that's talked about the most is for private institutions, is that there is a set cap each year for the number of H-1B visas that the US government issues. And you can see on the left-hand side here is that there are 65,000 visas that are available for all degrees, from bachelor's, master's, and PhDs. And then there's an additional 20,000 visas that are set aside specifically for students that have advanced degrees, such as a master's and PhD. You also see that for 2017, the US government announced that roughly 200,000 applicants applied for an H-1B. So if you look at those numbers, that means roughly 1 in 3 or so are being selected for an H-1B. And with the H-1B application, there is a deadline or a specific period for applications every year. They start on April 1st. And in the past couple of years, the application period has only gone that first week because they keep it open until they receive enough applications to field all of the visa types. And then for H-1B, the status doesn't go into effect until October of that same year, at the start of the next fiscal year for the government. So some takeaways for it. Kind of the biggest thing that I'm hoping you all take away is that for international students, when you're looking at CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, is that there is not much additional responsibility for an employer when hiring a student within one of these work authorizations, besides potentially providing an offer letter for CPT for an internship that a student will do prior to graduation. completing the I-9, or once we get into STEM OPT, is helping them fill out the I-983 training plan to help with their application for OPT. These are some resources that are available on our website. The bottom two links are the two documents that you have in front of you, the overview, and then the Employer's Guide to Hiring International Students. And at this point, I'm happy to field any questions that you all may have about hiring international students or working with international students.
Is in their undergrad, they can work a year before they graduate and then up to 3 years after?
Potentially,
Could
yes.
it be with the same employer potentially?
Yes. Yeah, so theoretically, say an undergraduate student gets hired for an internship with an employer, they could potentially work up to 364 days in an internship position. And then if that employer was interested in hiring them full-time, they could apply for OPT and hopefully have a seamless transition from when they're completing their degree to starting work full-time right afterwards, work for 12 months. And then as long as the employer uses E-Verify and the degree that the student has is STEM eligible, they can apply for a 24-month extension to work for 3 years after they've graduated.
And what was on that same subject, and you said right now there's an additional 24 months on that one?
Yes, yeah. So
really it's 5 years after, I mean.
No. So there's an initial 12 months of OPT that all students get. And so this is all students that have a non-STEM major and a STEM major. But just for the students that have a STEM major, they get 24 months on top of the first 12. So it would be 36 months of potential work authorization after they graduate.
I thought you said something about 2 extensions.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So there's 2 extensions. So in the case that we talked about here, the student would have used one extension, one of their 2 lifetime extensions. At that point, the student would need to go back to school to get a master's degree in a new STEM eligible field. They would graduate from the master's degree, be eligible for 12 months of OPT right away, and then they would be, based on the new STEM degree that they earned at the master's level, they'd be able to apply for an additional, the second time of the 24-month STEM extension. So they could work 3 years after their undergraduate degree, and then another 3 years after their graduate degree.
Do you generally always get approved for the STEM extension?
Most of the time, so the STEM extension and OPT are benefits of being in F1 status and being a student. So normally the students would get approved. There are some pieces that they have to follow to be able to get into being approved. Like from the day that they're recommended for the OPT or the extension, there's a finite window that their application has to get to the U.S. government. And so it's more of procedural errors that could potentially prevent them from getting it. But for the most part, students are normally approved for OPT and the STEM extension. David?
When you start your master's degree, do you have another CPT year?
Yes, so students do become eligible for CPT again once they start a new program. Normally, the student would need to be in that new program for 1 academic year before they'd be eligible for CPT again.
So I think I've sent a couple resumes around, and I think I'm understanding why I see sometimes there is a master's in, let's say, material science, and then they have a PhD in chemical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why we see those kinds of resumes where you have kind of a different field at a master's level and a different field at a PhD level? Because to get the 2-year
No, a student would still be eligible for it if they did master's degree in chemical engineering and a PhD in chemical engineering, because it would be a new STEM degree at the same level, or at a new level. They don't have to change degrees. Hopefully that's just for personal preference and hoping to broaden their horizons.
Thank you. When you say new degree, I thought it was going to be like a new area. So thank you for that clarification.
Sorry to sound about the STEM thing, but while they're on their 24-month extension on the STEM extension, can they be gaining their master's then? So there's no gap in employment, or is it truly back to school after the 24 months?
Yeah, it's back to school. Yeah, the regulations are written so that if students are on their OPT, they should be working, and that there's a rule within the regulations that say if the students start a new degree program, that their work authorization would end once they start seeking a new degree.
I just might add that at Iowa State with the SIP codes, I know we've worked with some students that at Iowa State it hadn't been listed as a STEM degree, and then the students had brought the program to the office and they kind of reevaluated maybe some of the changes in the major over the years, and some things have gotten obviously more scientific and more math related, and they were able to get those SIP code changes at Iowa State. So they may have been a non-STEM SIP code before, but then they've been able to move it over to a SIP code, so then they qualify for that extension. So I know there's a few graduate students I've worked with that had that work out. So just because a SIP code at one university says it's not, doesn't mean there might not be the possibility to get that changed at that university.
Karen, how long would that process be, and would that apply in their bachelor's degree as well?
I believe so. I'm not sure how long it takes the SIP code. I don't think it's that long.
Yeah,
It's an internal thing.
Yeah, it's an internal thing that the university reviews everything and kind of looks at what the requirements are based on to be able to use the other SIP code. So I want to say that it's, from what I've seen, it usually takes a semester or two. And each SIP code is selected at the bachelor's or master's degree. It's not just say, if we have, one of the interesting ones is management information systems. So right now at the bachelor's degree, it's not a STEM eligible SIP code, but at the graduate level it is. And so again, it's just because what they're teaching within the two levels are different. So each group of students would need to petition for it to be reviewed, or the university in general would review it to see if at the specific level it could be changed. And if it is changed, it would only affect the student while they are currently a student in that program. So say a student has graduated and they're on their 12 months of OPT, they couldn't go back and ask the university to change it because they would have completed their degree while it was still the old SIP code.
So if they're doing CPT, that's really the time to take a look if their degree matches, if the company is perhaps showing an interest in keeping them for the OPT.
Yeah, and especially if companies normally use internships to see if they can hire a student straight from the internship. That would be a time to take a look at it. But hopefully the universities are kind of always have an ongoing process of reviewing every academic semester, academic year, to see if there's been any noticeable changes within what they're teaching to the programs, to see if they need to update their SIP codes.
And when they're starting their degree programs at Iowa State in the bachelor level, are you advising international students to maybe go one direction for a degree that would be OPT eligible or STEM OPT eligible?
It's nothing that we would advise because we want the students to be able to go into the degree that they have a passion for. And so we don't advise for it. What we do see is, especially sometimes at the master's level, students will inquire when they're searching around applying for schools to see if the SIP codes are STEM eligible or not. Because since it's been in the news and available recently, more students are aware of the possibility of looking for instruction. So that's where we see most of it is students inquire to see if they can figure out which degrees, if they're between two, that they're kind of both, they're interested in both. Or they may say, oh, I can get a little bit more work experience in the U.S. To be able to take that back to my home country to get a better job, or they may see that potentially a student has a better chance of being sponsored if they fall within one of those fields.
So when you talk about the 90 days being unemployed once they get OPT, so we do have a lot of contract work, and I know students that if their contract ends, is it a combined 90 days, like from the beginning to the end of the first year? Or?
Yeah, so they have 12 months and 90 days. So say they start a position 45 days in, there they have 45 days. Say they have a contract for 6 months, their unemployment would start counting that day after as 46, day 46.
I think we ran a long time, so we're going to use our student panel a run time as well. Thank you for your presentation. I was going to ask, how many of you actually hire international students today on a regular basis? What kind of services can you provide? We don't have to tackle this now, but be thinking about it and we can follow up. So we can provide additional support, whether that is, how many of you maybe do like job fairs with international students? Have you guys done job fairs with international students? Not yet. So those are things I think we can help and facilitate and be kind of middle man, I guess, to provide that access to that talent pool. So those are things I think we can follow up with. But thank you for your presentation.
And I will stick around for the rest of the presentation, so if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask me directly afterwards, I'll be around. Thank you all very much for your time today.
So at this time, I would like to have our student panel come up here. David, do anyone of you need mics? Loud enough for him? Everyone? Yeah. Okay. Can you bring your name back with you? Oh, sorry. Sorry. All right, so sometimes, we hear about folks who are in the status and who experience who've gone through the program and done it themselves, and we really don't get a chance to interact with them and hear their stories and how it affects them and what their perspectives are. And so this we thought would be an opportunity for all of us to hear from students who've actually gone through the process and give you a feel of who they look like and what their experiences are and what they think. I think. So just wanted to plug in that in the next month's meeting, I feel like it will be very valuable to hear from employers who are actually utilizing international talent on a regular basis and have gone through the process of
I've been here a little bit over 6 years now. I started high school back home in 2008, and after 2 years, I completed my O-level exams, and around the time the government was trying to, it's 3 years of high school back in Ghana, but the government was hoping to switch it over to 4 years. So during that time, I transferred over to a different school after I took my O-level exam, and I managed to graduate within that 3-year period. But it was a Canadian high school that was operating in Ghana, so weirdly enough, never been to Canada, but I have a Canadian high school diploma. Applied for a student visa to go to Canada. That didn't really work out. So I had a travel visa for the US at the time. So I came over, studied for the SATs, took the SATs at USC, and took the TOEFL exam, which if you go through that exam, it's surprising. It's intense for an English exam for international students. But got that, got back home, took a year off. I worked as an office assistant for my father, who did public relations and consulting, media consulting, applying to colleges, and I ended up getting into California State, Los Angeles, fall of 2012. I was there for 2 years, and as a business management major. But I was looking to kind of broaden my horizons a little bit, looking for opportunities for a school that focused on international students, and also an environment with a budding, I guess, business sector. You know, Des Moines. You know how Des Moines is. So I found that Drake and Des Moines was that perfect combo. So I transferred over to Drake, graduated last year, and stuck around. It was kind of a rough time after I graduated, though, because there was a lot of uncertainty. I wasn't even sure if I was going to get, the OPT, my OPT approved, and for the couple of months that I was searching for jobs, I couldn't make any, I guess, solid plans about, what was going to happen, because I always felt like I was kind of reacting rather than being able to make, a solid, this is my 5-year plan, because you never know what's going to happen. The rules are changing all the time. But I felt that every interview I went into, or every phone interview I had, it would start off really well, but then as soon as I got to that point where I had to mention or had to explain what OPT was, it became very uncertain, because I realized that a lot of people didn't really know a lot about it, and it took focus away from what I could bring to the table, and me more trying to calm nerves more than anything else, and which is really unfortunate, because international students have a different kind of resilience, because it takes a lot to leave your home, leave your family, leave your friends, move to a completely different country and culture, and know that have this focus and know that there's this end goal, just to be successful and just make everyone you possibly can proud. Usually when people get into positions for jobs, there's a real commitment, because you pretty much can't mess up, because there's a lot riding on what you're doing. You can't get bad grades. There's a lot of expectation, and I feel like international students in general just have that commitment. They know that we know that we have a lot of eyes on us, and it's always appreciated when you can be able to present that to whoever you can. And I'm sorry, I kind of rambled on a little bit, but. So I didn't do my CPT. I did do the OPT though. OPT? Oh, Global Atlantic Financial. So I'm a contractor right now through Robert Half, and I started somewhere in September. And it's a great experience. First out of college job. I was definitely nervous the first couple of weeks, but everyone was really great. Up till now, I'm still every single day I walk into work, I'm learning something new. And it's just definitely a great opportunity, and I try to let my manager know every chance I get that I really appreciate you letting me be here and just learning all the stuff. So currently, I'm thinking about going back to Drake to the grad program. I'm thinking about taking the LSATs because the law program and the Masters of Finance program both consider the LSAT, so it's kind of trying to kill two birds with one stone. See how that works out. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Rayhana Jamshidi. So I came to US back in 2013 for my graduate school in mechanical engineering at Iowa State. So I did my undergraduate work at back in my home country in Iran. So I after doing a 2 year of like bachelor's degree, I started to face many limitations that didn't allow me to progress as much as I wanted to. For example, the equipment and facilities that so we didn't get enough of that, although like I studied at a top 3 university. So that was the time when I started to think about applying to United States for both better life opportunities and also educational facilities and opportunities. So, so my first challenge would be how I could overcome the financial difficulties of living in United States. So after doing a little bit of research, I realized that by proving that you have an exceptional educational background, it's possible to get financial support for both your tuition and also your living expenses. But it wasn't the easy thing to do because I realized U.S. schools are trying to absorb people from all over the world, and it's really competitive. So I try to keep my educational background at a high level, like getting good grades, doing relevant projects. So in addition to that, I started to improving my English, like taking the TOEFL and GRE exam, which was required for engineering. And so in addition to all that, school-related efforts, so I knew that I had to convince myself that my goal was precious enough that I would be separated from my family for more than few years, and also I had to get adapted to a new environment, new language, and everything would be new. So after I also had to contact different schools related to my work area and see which professors would be willing to have me join their group and also would support me financially. So after evaluating all the choices that I had, so I chose Iowa State among them and came here for my mechanical engineering degree. And so after that was the visa process, which was not an easy thing to do for me because in Iran we don't have a US embassy. So I had to apply for visa to go to another country to apply for US visa. And after waiting for a few months, I got a single entry visa, meaning that I could not go back to visit my family for at least few years. So I haven't gone back home since 2013, and I'm here. So yeah, this was the story how I came here. So I'm sure everybody has their own story. We might have some common things, and they might have some specific things that they have experienced. And after coming here, I realized that I need to really work hard to both be successful at the schoolwork and also learn and keep up with all the new things that are associated with living in US. And also to keep my status secure, because I know I had no family support or no other sort of support. So considering all that, I think like international students have to learn some life skills at a much higher level, like being determined for their goals, how much adaptable they need to be, and how hard working they need to be. Mm. So I think these experiences and skills really help them progress at their career. But when it comes to applying for a job, it's a really sad story. Like, for example, at career fair, out of the few hundred companies that attend career fair, only few of them are willing to speak to internationals. Also, like when we are applying for job online, we always see the question that, will you be requiring a sponsorship in the future? So by clicking yes, we technically narrow down our options to a lot less. Mm. But the thing is that the main thing is that for many internationals, their primary goal is not to get a sponsorship. For me and many others, I'm sure the primary goal is to get experience and apply all the knowledge and skills that we gained here at US school. So, oh, I've done a co-op, so I have used 7 months of my CPT, and I am eligible for OPT, but I haven't applied yet. I'm going to graduate this summer, so I will need to apply soon. At Whirlpool? Yeah. Um, yeah, so in addition to that, I was going to mention that so some international students which have advanced degree, they might not even need to get a sponsorship from where they work, because so many of them have enough talents and skills that they can independently apply for green card during those 3 years specifically, that they're adding up to all their skills and experiences. You're welcome.
Anyone have any questions? Station that you thought about after your turn passed?
I do. Something that is, I don't know if you're gonna ask more questions because I don't want to go ahead of anything. Something that is really important too is that there's other opportunities for us to stay here. International students is like any other student. We also had a hard time to fit in, had a hard time to make friends, relationships. But another route that we have is marriage, for example. But it's so hard for us even to have a relationship with someone without having to bring up the question of uh, status. I'm international. I like you, but I gotta be in front of you. Like if we're planning someone in the future, we gotta be straightforward and I'm probably gonna need to marry you. And even I know that it's something I don't want to talk about right now. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I need to be front with you. So that's something really hard for us to do. I have a girlfriend, for example, right now. I was gonna get a position in Walmart, but after they knew I needed a sponsorship probably in the future, I got rejected. And I just want to tell them, hey, I only need this chance for me to have some experience, have some financial stability, and I've been talking to my girlfriend. Probably we could get married in 3 years that I finish my OPT, and I could probably potentially stay here with you. But if I don't get that chance, I'll probably will have to break up with her, come back to Mexico, and that will never happen. And that's something hard. We all want to be like, we already spent here 10, 8, 5 years of our lives, we risked a lot to come here to the U.S. We left our families, and in financial, for example, for me, all my family, my dad and my mom had to sell everything so I could finish college. Um, and there's a lot of expectations from friends, family, like you mentioned, um, that they don't need to be met, but it's an extra stress that we have, all that on top of graduation, and then coming back and knowing that you spent all this money, all this time, and then you couldn't get at least that experience for you to start off. It's it's sad for us and stressful. So I don't know if you're gonna ask
There's
something
a
else.
personal side
Yeah.
to it, how it affects you all, right? So I don't know if you caught some of the things that I caught. I guess some of the things that I, like caught were like these are students or people who've been in the U.S. for what 5, 6, 10 years and are very acculturated and very used to living here and understand the system, and obviously their English language skills are very excellent because sometimes without knowing the person or look at their resume, we kind of have our own little, like, oh, maybe they're not fluent in English or we don't know how long they've been here. So I think those are some positives that I'm noticing. Like, in one of the things that that I also picked on was it's really hard to get into U.S. colleges, right? You've done a lot of work just to get here, and how would we know that he would have had an education, a Canadian high school education, if we hadn't given him that opportunity to share that with us? That's something I don't know if that necessarily comes out from his resume, if you had just looked at his resume. And so those are some of the things, excuse me, I picked on. Is there anything that anyone had a question on? Mary, is there any question or anything that we would like them to shed light on? No? Anyone, any questions for them, for the students?
And I enjoyed my job of supporting, all the students, but I support a lot of international students. So for your bravery in getting up and sharing your story with us, I know how difficult that was. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for making time to come and speak to us this morning. Appreciate it. Right. Thank you, everyone. So next meeting of one of the things I wanted to ask the group was, we're good. With our monthly meetings, does Friday work for most of you? Does time works for most of you?